CGTN, see the difference.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Chinese State Councillor and Minister of National Defence Wei Fenghe is currently on a state visit to Egypt's capital, Cairo. His visit seeks to boost military and security cooperation with the North African nation. The State Councillor has met the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Egyptian Defence Minister Mohamed Zaki. The meetings focused on the security challenges in the Middle East. Well, for more on that, let's now go live to CGTN's Adel El-Mahrouhi. Adel, can you give us more details about these meetings? What exactly has been discussed?
This meeting comes in the framework of the comprehensive strategic partnership between Egypt and China, which both President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and President Xi Jinping have signed and boosted the relations several years ago. The recent approach and closeness between the two nations have been deeply expanding in all sectors. Since 2016 specifically, there has been an approach and keenness from Cairo to expand military cooperation. Because of this entire comprehensive strategic partnership, both the Chinese State Councillor, the Egyptian President, and the Egyptian Defense Minister, they have discussed the main security files in the Middle East, the crisis and conflicts seen in neighboring countries to Egypt, and the threat of terrorism. They have discussed how the two countries can collaborate in that area and that field. They also stressed that they should enhance communication and expertise in the military field between both armies. And in that regard, in general, maintaining security in the region is quite crucial, not just to the Egyptian benefit, but to the Chinese as well. China has several huge investments in Egypt, and maintaining security in the region could boost these economic ties and make a win-win situation for both Cairo and Beijing.
Well, Adel, as you were saying, Cairo is keen to enhance military and security cooperation with Beijing. What is the current level of cooperation at the moment, and what is Egypt looking forward to?
Egypt is, in general, looking for diversifying the arms of its military. That's beside, of course, exchanging in expertise and boosting its armed forces and military manufacturers locally. Already there is a fleet of Chinese K-8 aircraft that is still operating in Egypt, and the army depends on. Egypt maintains and assembles some parts for these aircrafts. There is usage in and cooperation in the military drones, and there is interest that Egypt has shown lately during the military expos, both in Cairo and in the United Arab Emirates. Egypt has been quite interested in the Chinese missiles and expanding military cooperation. Usually there are many negotiations that are going on a daily basis. Since 2016, as I told you, Cairo said that it is very keen to expand this military cooperation between Cairo and Beijing. However, the specific details have not been finalized, and since since that there seems to be a lot of talks and negotiations. However, the main framework or the breakthroughs are yet to be finalized in the meetings that will follow. The Chinese State Councillor has met the Egyptian Defense Minister last November. This is their second meeting within 5 months, and there seems to be plans to intensify these meetings, these official meetings between the military officials between both countries.
Okay, Adel, thank you very much. That was CGTN's Adel El Mahrouhi there on the meetings between China and Egypt. Let's now turn to the DRC, where the International Rescue Committee is reporting at least 58 new Ebola cases. The humanitarian aid group says the number of cases could be higher. The outbreak in the DRC is currently the worst in its history. Government and aid agencies have been struggling to provide treatment due to insecurity and violence there. Mistrust within the community has also been a challenge, with 2 treatment centres getting burned to the ground earlier this month. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
Health experts from the International Rescue Committee have raised concern about the increasing number of Ebola cases in the DRC. 58 new cases were reported in North Kivu province last week. Authorities say the number was the highest this year. This outbreak of the deadly disease was reported in August last year. The number of cases reached 1,009 on Sunday. There are fears that the real number may be higher, given the insecurity and reluctance of some people to take patients for treatment. According to the Congolese Health Ministry, 629 people have died of Ebola since the start of the outbreak. More than 300 patients have been cured. The DRC government has called on the communities in the affected areas to work closely with the health workers to bring the outbreak to an end. This is the DRC's 10th Ebola outbreak and the worst in its history. Chris Ochemringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, earlier we spoke with Dr. Jacques Kachichi, the head of Ebola operations of the DRC Red Cross, about the rise in the number of Ebola cases. He also touched on the problems health workers face as they try to combat this outbreak.
They're still not believing on Ebola for some areas, but I mean, the high number of cases can be explained on all the resistance and all the community resistance, and then when they destroy some infrastructure, people are not, they don't trust really to the Ebola. So it remains a very big problem for the response. But, I mean, we are just making an effort, all the response team, to encourage people, and especially the health workers to well understood what is Ebola and how they can prevent it. But I mean, because of some cases among the health workers, because it's not, I mean, for instance, we cannot understand how 8 months later we have again infection amongst health workers. So, I mean, there is something wrong in prevention and infection control in the health facilities. This is one of part of the problem. But I mean, the other is just, people don't trust in Ebola. Next action is just to intensify the sensitization and community engagement. We need to talk more with people. We need to talk more with leaders. We must involve community leaders to ensure that they can just sensitize themselves, people, their own people. Because if we cannot do more sensitization, I don't know what will happen.
Member states from the Intergovernmental Authority on Development are reviewing progress made in finding sustainable solutions to the refugee crisis in the region. The meeting in Kampala is also being attended by refugee agencies, the UN and EU members. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Participants are meeting to find ways of improving the lives of refugees and their host communities. Refugee agencies say these countries need to find programs that can promote sustainable livelihoods for refugees.
Because we have kept refugees for many years and we have over 1 million plus refugees, we have even included refugees in our national development plan. How can we develop them so that they become also useful in our economy? Because there is no way some of them have stayed for 20, 30 years, so you can't do much.
Around 3.8 million refugees live within the IGAD states. Many are either poorly paid or unable to find work. These refugees mainly depend on handouts from aid agencies, but this is not sustainable. In Uganda, refugees are able to work and access health care and education in the same way that Ugandan citizens do.
For refugees, the opportunity to access decent work is central to their protection, personal well-being and self-reliance. It contributes to the survival and the well-being of families, establishes dignity and recognition within the wider community.
Participants at this meeting say member states need to do more to manage the refugee crisis. Countries like Uganda have kept their doors open to refugees, but the increasing numbers are overstretching resources like land, which is shared with host communities.
How to address the increasing pressure on the availability and quality of land, and whether we need to look for alternative livelihoods, including in urban areas. This was already raised by His Excellency President Museveni during the Nairobi IGAD Refugee Summit.
Delegates here are asking refugee hosting states to create more jobs and income-generating opportunities for asylum seekers. At the end of this 4-day meeting, members will agree to action plans on how to improve the livelihoods of refugees in their countries. But participants here say key to all this is ending the conflict in the region, arguing that this is the only way to resolving the problem of refugees. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, in Kampala.
In its efforts to fight racism, xenophobia and other forms of discrimination, the South African government has launched a national action plan to assist in combating prejudice. The aim of the plan is to protect the rights of individuals and groups facing racial discrimination and to promote mutual understanding among different groups. CGTN's Yulissa Njamela has more.
While apartheid was brought to an end more than 2 decades ago, the country is still struggling with incidents of racism, racial discrimination, and other related intolerance. Xenophobia has also seen a surge in the past few years. The National Action Plan provides the basis for the development of a comprehensive public policy against racial discrimination. It will assist South Africa in giving effect to its international human rights obligations related to the elimination of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and other intolerances. The launch is the culmination of an extensive process which started in 2015 for the development of the plan.
The NAP is an important tool to prevent and combat racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, and other discriminatory conduct and forms of prejudice that we've been experiencing in our country recently. Not only racism, but LGBTI discrimination and anti-foreigner sentiments. It gives effect to the prescripts of the Constitution, which enshrine the rights of all people in our country and affirm the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom.
The plan clearly sets out what should be done to combat these societal ills. It also calls for honest conversations in order to create social cohesion.
After the xenophobic violence of 2008, and more recently in 2015, UNHCR takes this opportunity to commend the government on its stance against a form and level of discrimination that has resulted in the loss of livelihoods, property, and even life and limb.
Officials emphasize the need to ensure that foreign nationals are also protected by this plan.
It is very also important for us to indicate that migrants selflessly contributed immensely towards the democratization of South Africa and the cause today for Pan-Africanism to encourage and strengthen bonds of solidarity between all peoples of African descent.
While solid on paper, practical implementation of the plan will be most key.
This will require vigilance on the part of all in our society, and also a determination by the government to ensure that those who behave in ways which are detrimental to this constitutional ideal must be dealt with in the harshest possible way.
The plan is also intended to promote human dignity through the promotion and protection of human rights. Government maintains that the National Action Plan is not intended to replace the existing laws and policies, but rather to play a complementary role to those policies, programs and legislations which are intended to deal with issues of intolerance and discrimination. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
In Morocco, striking teachers have taken to the streets in fresh protests. They're demanding an end to renewable contracts and better terms of service.
About 10,000 teachers staged a new protest in the Moroccan capital, Rabat, to demand permanent jobs. They marched from the Education Ministry to the square in front of Parliament.
This Ministry of Education does not respect democratic contracts or binding laws. It does not respect teachers as people or as citizens. For example, it says that if the teacher becomes ill, then his or her contract is immediately terminated, without notice and without compensation. What humanity and what dignity are they talking about?
The teachers want an end to renewable contracts in favor of permanent jobs that offer civil service benefits. This includes a better retirement pension.
Our request is a very simple one. We want to be part of the civil service because it's a constitutional right for every Moroccan. We also want for the abolition of the contracting procedure because it tries to break all the links with the public service and abolish public schools.
The protest was organized by an alliance of leftist opposition parties, main unions, civil society organizations, and university students. The teachers have been striking for 3 weeks in a row.
It was a bloody night, as if we were in a war against the oppressing forces that hurt the teachers and humiliated them in the streets of Rabat. We are Pacific people, not separatists or people who have a political agenda or anything like that. Our unique objective is a simple social request that could easily be found.
Alexandria Majala for CGTN. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
recap of our top stories now. President Xi Jinping has arrived at the Élysée Palace, where he's expected to hold a roundtable meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron. Beijing and Paris will be signing a series of cooperation agreements in fields like nuclear power and aerospace. Well, earlier, a welcoming ceremony was held for the Chinese president at the Arc de Triomphe. This is the third leg of President Xi's European tour. In the DRC, the International Rescue Committee is reporting at least 58 new Ebola cases. The humanitarian aid group says the number of cases could be higher. The outbreak in the DRC is currently the second worst in its history. Government and aid agencies have been struggling to provide treatment due to insecurity and violence. While the risk of waterborne diseases is increasing, aid agencies and authorities are gearing up to move the tons of aid that has been accumulating in and around Beria and other collection points in the region. Beria took the full brunt of Cyclone Idai, with aid agencies reporting that 90% of the city have been destroyed by the storm. Nearly 2 weeks later, the city is starting to recover. The death toll has now risen to 750 people across southern Africa. Chinese State Councillor and Minister of National Defense Wei Fenghe is currently on a state visit in Egypt's capital, Cairo. His visit seeks to boost military and security cooperation with the North African nation. The State Councillor has met the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Egyptian Defense Minister Mohamed Zaki. Well, that is the top stories that we are covering for you. Let's now go to Ucha for the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you, Karen. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Plane manufacturer Boeing gets commitments from Ethiopia and Qatar as investigations into the 737 MAX continue. And the 2019 edition of the Africa CEO Forum kicks off in Kigali, Rwanda.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sue. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads, where opportunity meets innovation, where profitable new markets collide with global trends. From the sound of an African bell on a stock market's floor to the shout of a trader in a bustling free market, it's colorful, vibrant, and exotic. CGTN stands at the gateway to Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. From Morocco to South Africa, we talk to the deal makers and actors who fuel its engines of growth. Only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, Well, let's start off with Ethiopian Airlines. The company says it will keep a close ties with U.S. plane manufacturer Boeing, despite concerns about its 737 MAX 8 model, which of course crashed earlier this month, killing all 157 people on board. Now, Boeing has come under intense scrutiny as this was the second crash of their new 737 MAX 8 planes. The CEO of Ethiopian Airlines has promised to work closely with the investigators following reports of a lack of cooperation from the Ethiopian authorities. Qatar Airways has also supported Boeing. It has ordered about 20 MAX jets and is committed to buying a further 40. Now, Boeing says it has taken delivery of 5 of the aircraft. The 737 MAX fleet has been grounded worldwide, wiping about $28 billion off the company's market value. Well, let's move on now. The largest annual conference for Africa's private sector has seen more than 1,500 delegates descend on the Rwandan capital of Kigali. They certainly seem to have one thing in mind, and that's regional economic integration. Now, it's a partnership with the International Finance Corporation, which is aimed at enhancing Africa's development. The IFC says Africa's decreasing foreign direct investment, coupled with growing public debt, are a cause of great concern. Now, to help bridge that gap, the forum's president, Amir Ben Yahmed, has identified energy, agriculture and tourism amongst the most important that can help accelerate economic growth.
Nature leadership. This is fundamental. We are going from a moment where before governments were all around trying to promote growth without talking to the private sector, without associating to the private sector. And now, once we have created the CEO Forum, we have made it the biggest platform for African companies to try to engage with the governments, and growth needs to come from the private sector. It's not going to come from the governments. Governments are already highly indebted, and the main goal right now is to empower private sector to create this growth.
Well, let's head to Egypt now. The country has embarked on a new strategy to double its exports in the next 5 years. The move is aimed at boosting Egypt's foreign exchange earnings as well as improve its trade balance. Now, this is all part of incentives being lined up by the North African state in order to rebuild its shattered economy.
The government has outlined certain steps to go ahead with the export strategy. The main pillars are based on developing the manufacturing sector.
After the 2011 uprising, there was a sharp drop in industry and production as a result of the demonstrations and violence. This kept investors away from the country. Lately, we've seen the political leadership putting emphasis on improving the investment climate.
The government has established a subsidy mechanism. This system allows producers to receive a payback on taxes and costs if they export their products. It's part of a host of incentives being lined up by the government.
In addition to the newly ratified investment law, commended by foreign investors, banks are now funding SMEs at low interest rates. The state is distributing industrial land, which was something impossible to find before, as well as a plan to help reopen factories that closed down after the uprising.
To increase exports, you need a healthy industry, but there are some challenges ahead.
Some sectors are facing difficulties, such as the steel industry, which we work in. The cost of production has increased drastically because of the rise in interest rates at the banks and the increase of energy prices. This way, we cannot compete in the international market or export. There must be strict quality control on all goods that are exported to maintain a strong reputation for the Egyptian products abroad.
The government strategy is also identifying the markets to penetrate and what products each market needs. The main priority is to target African countries.
We have a wide variety of exports to supply the continent, from textiles, clothes, furniture and agricultural products.
Through this comprehensive strategy, the government is targeting exports to increase from the current $26 billion to $55 billion in the next 5 years. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, Tunisia's government is exploring cooperation opportunities in the field of transport infrastructure. The North African state recently signed 3 memoranda of understanding with the Chinese government in order to conduct studies on 7 mega projects. Here's CGTN's Adnan Shaoshi with more.
Tunisia and China signed 3 memoranda of understanding to conduct studies on 7 mega projects as part of the public-private partnership.
The first agreement to carry out 3 technical and economic feasibility studies of the administrative city Taparura project in Sfax and Ebola project was linked by the authorities and China North Industries Group Corporation, Norinco.
A second memorandum of understanding was inked by the Minister of Investment and Development and Vice President of China Communications Construction Company Limited in Beijing. It includes 3 technical studies pertaining to a Trans-Maghreb railway line, Tabarqa near the Algerian border, Tunis and Ras Jdir near the border with Libya, as well as the construction of the sports city of Sfax.
Realizing gigantic infrastructure projects is a specialty of Chinese companies in Africa and the world. They have the expertise and the technology to complete any project. Increasing cooperation with China is a strategic choice for Tunisia.
MPs in the Finance Commission of the Tunisian Parliament assert that they will back any cooperation project between the Tunisian state and the Chinese government.
A third memorandum of understanding provides for updating a project study on the highway section linking the city of Jendouba to the Algeria border. It was signed between the Tunisian government and China Railway Construction Corporation. The parliament approves all forms of economic cooperation with China.
Tunisian authorities assert that the south will also benefit from increased cooperation with China. New projects are now under study by the government and Chinese enterprises. According to the Ministry of Investment and Development, the new infrastructure projects in the south of the country include the development of the Zerzis economic pole, a new bridge and the railway line between Gebes and Mednin up to the port of the city of Zerzis. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, ahead of the China-Africa Economic and Trade Expo, which is set for June this year, a Chinese delegation from Hunan province, led by Governor Xi Jinping, has visited a local Kenyan company in a bid to engage and familiarize itself in African brand products. Now, Mr. Jinping later visited the African headquarters of China Global Television Networks, based in the capital, Nairobi. His visit seeks to enhance economic and industrial cooperation and transformation between China and Kenya. The Sino-African Trade Expo will be held in China's city of Changsha. It is projected to promote investment, trade and future economic cooperation between China and Africa. Meanwhile, Chinese construction giant China State Construction Engineering Corporation has won a $134 million tender to build a bridge in the commercial capital of Côte d'Ivoire in Abidjan. The contract is part of the West African state's $700 million Cocody Bay Precinct Development Project. It is set to ease traffic between 2 major poles of activities in the city, bringing the number of bridges in the economic capital to 5. It's funded by the Islamic Development Bank, and construction is expected to be completed by 2021.
We are facing the realization of a project of great economic, strategic and tourist importance for our economic capital. Its completion will improve the flow of traffic between many municipalities. In addition, the construction of this cable-stayed bridge, which is unique in its design, will give a special glow to Côte d'Ivoire. I'm sure it will welcome many national and international visitors.
Once this bridge is built, it will be an emblematic building in the enhancement of Cocody Bay, which will become like a postcard open to the world. Once it's operational, it will relieve congestion in the business center of the municipality, as it holds more than 40,000 vehicles per day.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up on Global Business Africa, the Africa CEO Forum has kicked off in the Rwandan capital of Kigali. Over 1,500 delegates, including 4 heads of state, are in attendance. We'll certainly have the latest from there. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Ucha. Well, we are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including... We catch up with the Kenyan teacher who gave away most of his earnings only to win $1 million at the Global Education and Skills Forum.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Senegal, over 1,000 people celebrated the Hindu festival of Holi in the capital Dakar. Organised by the Indian Embassy for the 2nd year running, revellers were throwing coloured powder and water at each other at the African Renaissance monument. Known as the Festival of Colours or the Festival of Love, Holi celebrates not only the arrival of spring, but also the triumph of good over evil. Held between February and March each year, it's said to be a time for forgiveness and for mending broken relationships.
In our tradition, color plays an important role in our lives, especially for interaction with the world. Each color sends a specific signal that's affecting our life physically, mentally, and psychologically. The green refers to joy and happiness. The yellow refers to knowledge. The blue refers to bravery and determination. And white refers to cleanliness and peace.
It's very funny and joyful. People here do not know each other, but we celebrate the festival together. Frankly speaking, it's something we should do more often. It is an Indian cultural tradition, and Senegal is the land of hospitality, so it's something that goes well with our culture too.
Constitution Hill is a symbol of South Africa's hard-fought freedom. Once the site of imprisonment of freedom fighters, it now houses the Constitutional Court, which upholds the rights of all South Africans. The Human Rights Day Festival highlights the work of social justice organisations in the country and commemorates the lives lost during the Sharpeville massacre in 1960. CGTN's Julie Sher reports.
The Human Rights Festival held at Constitution Hill commemorates one of South Africa's most painful days, the 21st of March 1960, when 69 people were killed by state police.
It was the day that Robert Sobukwe led a peaceful protest by PAC leaders to disregard the passes that the apartheid government had imposed on them and encourage them to leave their passes at home and peacefully go to the police stations and surrender themselves to be arrested. Police opened fire on the masses in Sharpeville, and these people all shot in the back as they turned around to run away, and they were peaceful.
It was also a turning point which led to the armed struggle and 3 decades of often deadly protests against the apartheid regime. Many freedom fighters were jailed at this very site.
Gandhi was locked up here, Mandela was locked up here, thousands of our leaders were locked up here, men and women. And that very site of imprisonment, of racism, of authoritarian, brutal authoritarian rule is the place where we built our new constitutional court that upholds the new values.
This year's Human Rights Festival coincides with South Africa celebrating 25 years of democracy, as well as the 70th year of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The festival is a democratic space to reflect and promote social justice.
I'm celebrating the fact that I can be myself and I am free to be in my humanity. You know, I'm equal as everyone else in the world. I can do anything that anyone in the world can do without being restricted.
It's freedom of saying things that I want to then say and freedom of making choices. Like in education, I can study anything that I want. My children are now able. One is able to then study and is a junior architecture, and then the other one is just doing accounting, commerce, things that were not for us.
But many feel the fight is not over yet.
Women for the longest time have been fighting to be heard. Sadly, 25 years into democracy, our voice is not even heard anymore. I mean, we are the world's capital with femicide, and 41% of our rape cases are children.
The second Human Rights Festival had something for everyone, but the event is really a call for all to take a stand and promote human rights in all areas of society, and to never forget South Africa's painful past. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Kenya, Peter Tabichi, a teacher who donates most of his earnings to the poor, has won the $1 Million Global Teacher Prize. Tabichi was chosen from 10,000 applicants. He's the first African to win the prestigious education prize. CGTN's Astatal has more.
Peter Tabichi.
Peter Tabichi teaches high schoolers in a remote village back in Kenya, but his dedication goes beyond the classroom. He donates 80% of his salary to support pupils who otherwise would not be able to afford uniforms or textbooks. For his dedication, the math and physics teacher was recognized at this year's Global Teacher Prize Awards.
I feel great. I can't believe it. I feel so happy to be among the best teachers in the world, being the best in the world.
Our finalists, and to each and every dedicated teacher, you give me faith that Africa's best days are ahead of us.
I appreciate him. Thanks so much.
He has become the first African to win this prestigious prize of $1 million.
I think anybody who cares about the future of this planet realizes the key is education, but I found tonight to be incredibly emotional, very moving. There were 10 teachers on stage tonight, clearly representing all the millions of brilliant teachers around the world, and they're the ones that make the difference.
This one, I'm going to give it back to the society, okay? Because myself, I'm a brother, okay? Our needs are catered for, like food, clothing, and everything. So I'll be so happy. In fact, it is a great moment that the society is going to benefit.
Peter Tabichi from Kenya.
The Global Teacher Prize is now in its 5th year. It is becoming one of the most prestigious awards for teachers. Tabichi plans to use his prize money to improve the school and feed the poor. Astatal, CGTN.
Congratulations to Peter Tabichi there. We are going to a short break. Sport coming up. Including African contingent shines in Los Angeles, men and women's marathon.